Hello, Stalin. I can see you there. How are you? Hello?
Malim, he may not be near. He may not be near his mic.
Yeah.
I would suggest that for purposes of those who are present, we move on.
But apparently nobody's report is responding. Faith and Betty.
Stalin is there. He says he has sent a message.
Okay, fine. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's training. First of all, I want to apologize for us starting late. I had a few challenges here connecting to my network, but I believe we shall start right now and end at the appointed time. So for those that have never met before, my name is Andrew Ondari. I am a HR professional working for the Academy of Certified Human Resource Professionals. And today I want us to go through a very interesting program, and that is Fundamentals of Human Resource Audit. This program is part of the bigger program called Certified Human Resource Auditor, where we are going to look at various ways in which we can audit our HR systems, functions, and processes. This is a 5-day training, which we are starting today until Friday. We shall be conducting this training every day from 5 up to 8 p.m. At the end of this training program, all of us shall be awarded a certificate showing that you have qualified to be a human resource auditor. This means that all of us must attend starting today until Friday for us to get the certificate. This program is divided into 5 modules. And the first module for today is entitled Foundations of Human Resource Management. If you can see it from your screen, I can share the screen right now for us to see. If you can give me a second, I'll share the screen. Okay, I guess all of us can now see the screen from where you are. The course, as I've indicated, is called Certified Human Resource Auditor. By the end of this week, those of us who will have attended the full training will be awarded a certificate showing that you have attended and successfully completed this course. This course runs from today, the 7th, up to 11th of September 2024. Our first topic is the Foundations of Human Resource Auditor, which is basically an introduction to the Certified Human Resource Auditor certificate. In this module of Foundations of Human Resource, which is the first module, has several components which we are going to discuss starting now. And the first aspect we are going to look at is Introduction to Human Resource Audit, where we are going to give a background of what human resource audit is, the areas that we are going to focus on in the audit, as well as the definitions that will be our defining concept. And then after that, we shall look at the objectives of human resource audits. There are several objectives which I will highlight for the benefit of those that are here. Thirdly, I will look at the scope and the limitations of HR audit. By scope, I mean the areas that are covered in the HR audit. And our focus will be on the functions of HR. And then the limitations, these are the challenges that face HR managers in conducting HR audits. Towards the end, we shall look at the importance of HR audit. And then lastly, we should look at the requirement for HR auditors. That for us as HR managers, there are certain requirements that we must have, and this makes us qualified as HR auditors. So having said that, I want us to move to the next slide, which is our introduction and our first concept. I have highlighted, I'm not going to read the whole slide. I've highlighted several areas which we are going to focus on. Basically, by way of introduction, we are saying that HR audit involves assessing or evaluating the functions of HR management and how this contributes to the achievement of organizational objectives and strategies. So by definition, we can say that HR audit is that process of evaluating or assessing the policies, the processes, and the systems in the HR function. It encompasses those components that you can see from your screen, one of which is employee records. That when you are auditing the HR function, there are several records and documents that we keep, which help us to navigate this landscape of HR. There are various records related to employment, which I will be mentioning as we move on. The second aspect that we shall be auditing is the recruitment process. As we all know, this is one of the basic functions of HR managers, and it's a process of bringing on board potential and qualified candidates. So we shall be looking at the functions of HR, one of which is recruitment and selection. Thirdly, performance management is another area that HR managers audit, where we are looking at the planning, the appraisals, the monitoring, and the evaluation of the output of employees over a given period of time. Training and development is another area that is covered in this audit, as well as compensation and benefits administration. This is an introduction to our HR audit. As I mentioned earlier, the concept of HR audit means assessing existing or current policies, procedures, and practices. When you talk of policies, these are the broad guidelines that help us to manage the various functions of HR. From our experience, I know you have various policies in different areas, such as recruitment and selection, training and development, performance appraisal, health and safety, among others. So this is one of the pillars of HR audit, that when you look at the functions of HR, they are all guided by HR policies. The other element is the procedures. These are the steps that are undertaken with respect to the various functions to ensure that the HR managers achieve their objectives. For example, in training and development, there are various procedures that are involved, one of which is to conduct training analysis. The second one is to design the training program. The other one is to develop the training materials, and then implementing, and lastly, evaluating. So those are procedures that are involved in training and development. Lastly, we have the practices. These practices arise or are derived from the culture of the organization. Like in HR, there are various practices related to the HR functions. For example, in recruitment, the practice is always to identify the need for filling vacant positions, without which you cannot possibly be successful in the recruitment process. In training, there is the element of training needs analysis, which is a practice, and therefore these practices form part of the architecture of the training of the HR audit function. I have also indicated there that HR audit attempts to determine the current state of affairs of the HR department. The current state is what is happening currently with the organization. And for us to reach there at that stage, we may have to look at the history of that department, where it has come from and where it is now. So in a way, HR audit is concerned with establishing a trend which helps us to determine the current state of performance in the organization. The other one is to measure the value of people. It is said that human resources are the most important asset of any organization. For us to be an asset, then we must add value to the organization. So what value do people bring to an organization? I can mention 3 or 4. 1, they bring innovation. 2, they provide services to clients. And 3, they can bring revenue or profits. So when we are talking about HR audit, we are looking at how employees bring value to the organization through all the HR functions. And lastly, we are looking at the concept of HR audit as a health checkup. This helps us to identify our touch points. Probably our systems are ailing, our policies are not working, and our practices are in the sick bed. So through HR audit, we are able to identify where the HR function is ailing. And therefore, it's a kind of a diagnosis which we undertake to determine which areas of the HR department are not working, and therefore take corrective measures. For those areas that are working well, what we do is to maintain them or strengthen them. So basically, that is the concept of HR audit. I want us to move on, in the interest of time, to the next slide and look at the various types of HR audit. The first one up there is compliance. Compliance has to do with adherence to the various labor laws. And I can mention several of the labor laws that we have to comply with as HR professionals. 1 is the Employment Act. 2 is the Labor Relations Act. 3 is the Occupational Safety and Health Act. 4 is the Work Injuries and Benefits Act. And 5 is the Employment and Labor Relations Court Act. As HR professionals, we are expected to be conversant with the basic provisions of these labor laws. For instance, In a function like recruitment and selection, we are expected to know what the Employment Act says, particularly with regard to diversity issues. Both in private and public sector organizations, compliance is a very key factor. So when you are auditing your HR functions, you look at the extent to which they comply with all the labor laws that I have mentioned. Therefore, if there are any issues related to compliance, the HR audit is able to pick them out or flag them out, and then as a HR professional, you are expected to make recommendations on how the organization can ensure compliance. We all know that failure to comply with the labor laws comes with penalties, especially lawsuits. Lawsuits are very expensive, and therefore organizations cannot afford to go that route. So compliance is very key. Secondly, another type of audit is the functional audit, where we are looking at all the HR functions and how effective they are. For example, if we look at training and development, that is an area, a function within HR. And in training, you look at all the components of training, whether they exist, and if they exist, are they working? And if they are working, to what level are they working? And what gaps are there? For instance, a HR auditor could identify various aspects which could form part of the checklist in the audit. So in training and development, you could look at one, the training policy. Is there a training policy? Two, is there a training needs analysis? Three, is there a training budget? And four, is the training evaluated at the end of it? So all these are audit aspects that we could look at in terms of training and development, because we are looking at the performance of training and development in our organization. And we look at all the HR functions, like performance management. We also look at employee relations. There are other functions that you could look at, including compensation and reward management. How well is our reward system structured? What are the bottlenecks that we face in this area? So performance audit basically focuses on the various HR functions and how effectively they are being performed. The other type of HR audit is strategic audit, where we are looking at how the HR practices, policies, and systems are aligned with the corporate strategies. As it were, all HR functions must help to achieve the 3 or 4 key aspects related to corporate strategy. One is the mission, that the HR function must help to achieve the purpose of the organization. Every organization has its mission. That is the core business it's doing. And if HR has to audit it, it must focus on how the functions are helping to achieve the mission. Still on strategies, you look at the vision. Where is the organization going? What are its aspirations in the next 5, 10, 15, or 20 years? So as HR auditors, we are going to look at the HR functions and how well they help in achieving the mission of the organization. The third aspect of strategic audit is the strategies. Every organization has its own strategies that it wants to achieve in order to remain competitive or achieve its business objectives. These strategies can be classified into 3 categories. 1, growth strategies. 2, maintenance strategies. And 3, harvest strategies. So as HR managers, we are going to look at all these strategies and try to align our practices to all of them. For example, if an organization is in a growth trajectory, as HR managers, we are going to look at recruitment and selection, training and development, so that we can meet this strategy of growth. Because through recruitment and selection, we are able to hire new employees to take positions in the branches or in the other products that the organization is growing into. The fourth type of HR audit is operational audit, where we are looking at the HR processes and systems and how efficient and effective they are. This is where the rubber meets the road. As HR managers, our operational efficiency must be above board, because failure in operations means that there's a failure in the whole system. There are various operational aspects that we are going to look at. One is the policies. Policies help us in the day-to-day operations, be it in recruitment, be it in training, be it in discipline. All these are guided by policies. So as HR managers, we need to assess our processes and the systems to ensure that they are functioning effectively. Lastly, we look at the cultural audit, where we are looking at the organizational culture and how well the HR function is helping to sustain or maintain this culture. In terms of culture, there are three key aspects that we look at. One, the core values. Two, the norms. And three, the beliefs. Allow me to address myself to the first aspect, which is the core values. Core values are the things that the organization stands for, or things that are considered to be very important for the success of the organization. So in HR, we audit the organizational culture in terms of core values. So what are the core values? I can mention a few examples. One, innovation. Two, professionalism. And three, honesty and integrity. If I may pick the first one, a core value called innovation. As HR managers, we must promote innovativeness at all times. When it comes to recruitment, our focus could be on hiring innovative employees who can help us achieve organizational objectives. In training, it's the same thing, that we focus on training and developing people so that they can enhance their innovation. So in terms of cultural audit, we are going to look at what practices in all the HR functions promote the organizational culture, because culture determines the behavior of people in organizations. So basically, those are the 5 key types of HR audit, which if you perform them, you are likely to be successful. Our next slide, or our next area of discussion, is the objectives of HR audit. I have given a number of objectives that are going to be achieved by conducting the HR audit. The first objective, which I have highlighted, is cost efficiency. That as HR managers, we are expected to assist the organization to manage cost. In particular, there are very many cost areas in an organization which we could look at. One is usage of other resources like finance and raw materials. If these resources are not used optimally, there is a likelihood of wastage. Waste is an aspect of cost because any materials or finances wasted, that becomes a cost to an organization. So as HR managers, we are expected to audit our systems in order to achieve cost efficiency. So how do we minimize cost? One is to train people, especially in areas of waste of time, waste of money, waste of raw materials. So through training, we are able to achieve this cost efficiency. And we also try to balance other areas where there is money being spent, like in training. The trainings that we mount in our organizations should be relevant and suitable for purpose. In some organizations, trainings are undertaken just because there is a requirement. But we need to interrogate why we are spending so much on training, and then spending that money which we cannot recover. So when we train people, it must be based on a training need. And when trainings are based on needs, then we are likely to be efficient in our cost. Otherwise, if you train people for the sake of it, then we waste our financial resources. Secondly is the element of budget allocation. Every year, we prepare budgets as HR managers on how we are going to spend in areas like recruitment, training, performance management, compensation, and benefits. So a budget can be developed by HR auditors, especially when we know which areas we are going to look at. So you develop a budget based on your audit report. So you prioritize areas in your audit, which is going to help us to perform our functions effectively. So through audit, we are able to allocate enough resources to achieve our departmental objectives as well as organizational goals and strategies. The other one is payroll management. As I have indicated, one of the core functions of HR is compensation and benefits. Managers in many organizations, especially HR, are in charge of payroll. So through HR audit, we are able to achieve accuracy and compliance when we conduct audits. So in the payroll, we are going to look at how many people do we have in our establishment through this HR audit, so that we don't have ghost workers who are paid money for not working. And again, through payroll, we are able to identify the various aspects related to pay, like absenteeism, so that we don't pay people for being absent. It's the work of HR auditors to identify the right people to be paid. So our starting point in HR audit is to conduct a head count so that we know exactly who will give us the numbers of people who are working in all the departments. Next is compliance, that HR managers work towards compliance of various laws. For example, we pay tax. Tax is a legal requirement, and there are very many taxes associated with HR. For example, pay as you earn, or housing levy, and many other laws that require HR managers to deduct the salaries of employees as a statutory requirement. So through HR audit, we are looking at how compensation is in adherence to the labor laws, particularly the Employment Act, which stipulates that HR managers must deduct the statutory deductions from employee salaries. And the last objective there of HR audit is to ensure optimum resource utilization. There is a possibility that our systems may not be utilizing our human resources in an efficient way. We must have the right number in the first place, and these people must be doing the right jobs at the right places and at the right time. So in utilizing our human resources, we make sure that they are fully engaged. And for us to do that, we need to review their job descriptions. So one of the aspects of audit, which we are going to look at, is how job descriptions can be designed in a way that people are engaged the whole day. So in resource utilization, we are looking at how we are using our human resources to produce desired and quality goods and services in our organizations without waste. So basically, those are the objectives of HR audit. There are others that also include return on investment. For example, training and development is an area where organizations invest in. It's expected that after investing in this area, there must be a return. And one of the returns from a training intervention is that there will be reduced wastage. So after training, we expect that if there was a wastage of resources and time, this will be reduced. So an objective of HR audit is to look at what are the returns from the various functions of HR. Even in performance management, we need to get a return from this investment. Or health and safety. These are another area where we are investing in a conducive environment so that employees can be productive. So in health and safety, we look at the various areas in which we have invested and how much we are benefiting from this. The other aspect, which is an objective of HR, is risk management. There are many risks associated with HR. I've mentioned about 4. One is fraud, the other one is payroll errors, where there are ghost workers, and then misappropriation. There are other risk factors associated with HR, one of which is high levels of turnover. That if our systems are not working, there's a possibility of employees exiting through voluntary resignations. If many employees leave, we shall experience what they call knowledge drain or brain drain. When we lose the knowledgeable, skilled, and experienced employees, then it becomes expensive for us. One, to find a suitable replacement, or 2, to reach the optimal level of performance, even if we bring new employees. So turnover is a risk. And therefore, as HR auditors, we need to look at what are the risk areas which are likely to affect our organizations and make recommendations. For example, working environment, if it is not conducive, it's a risk. People become sick, people can be injured. And there are a lot of costs associated with a poor working environment where people are sick and are injured. The costs are very high. So our HR audit will also look at the health and safety aspects of the organization where risks could arise and take appropriate measures so as to avoid or minimize the risks. Lastly is the compensation structures. Different organizations have different payment structures or compensation structures. When we audit these structures, we should find out which is the best structure that can give us the results that we want. By compensating employees appropriately, we are able to attract and retain those high quality performers. So the compensation structures must be designed in a way that they are able to attract and retain employees so as organizations can remain competitive in the market. As it were, a good compensation system is one that is internally equitable and externally competitive. So the HR audit will help us to unravel the internal equity and external competitiveness of our compensation system. So in this way, we are able to identify which structures can give us optimal results. For employee productivity, I think I've already mentioned it, that through HR audit, we are able to identify strengths and weaknesses in the system and then address aspects of productivity. HR audit has become very important, and that's why we have the next slide there, or next aspect. That is why HR audit has become very necessary in today's organization. One of the reasons why we conduct audit, or why audit has become necessary, is the diversity of our workforce. All our organizations have people from different backgrounds in terms of their religion, their gender, ethnic background, education, or even age. For organizations, especially in the public sector organizations, we want to find a balance among these backgrounds. For example, gender balance. This is an area that is already regulated, that we need to balance our gender so that we give opportunities to both male and women in terms of employment and growth opportunities. It is a legal requirement, especially in public sector, to ensure that our workforce is represented. There is a face of Kenya in our recruitment and selection processes. And therefore, when you do an HR audit, you will look at the diversity of the workforce and balance between the differences. Secondly, another reason why audits have become necessary is through technological advances. Today, technology has become the day-to-day enabler of our work. For example, we recruit through technology by way of advertising, either on our websites or in social media. We also use technologies in performance appraisals. We use technology in training and development by posting training materials or creating learning management systems. So we audit HR because there is advancement of technology which has made it possible to evaluate the HR functions. So if you want to assess the effectiveness of the HR function, you can adopt technology for you to be competitive and accurate in your own evaluations. Number 3 is the changing work environment. Our environment has become very dynamic, which requires that organizations become agile. Without this flexibility, it becomes very difficult. So HR audits will help us to identify whether or not our systems are agile. Are they flexible to accommodate changes in our environment? We are all aware that we live in a global market where we interact, communicate, and share resources within a very short time. And therefore, whatever is happening elsewhere in the world can also affect us. When we audit our systems, we think globally and act locally, so that we are at par with other players in the international market. So in this way, we are able to identify trends that are obtaining in the world market and also customize them to suit our settings. One of the key aspects that has come into play in the recent past is remote working. Today, people work from home or from anywhere else and still deliver results. So our systems must also be flexible. For example, our appraisal system should also be flexible enough to accommodate remote working, where people are not supervised and where people work independently. So the changing work environment has necessitated the audit of our systems to ensure that we are flexible in the way we perform our functions as HR managers. The other aspect that has led to today, employees expect many things. One, more independence, freedom, and more autonomy. So our systems should respond to these expectations without hurting. For instance, some employees may want customized training. That is an expectation. That for us to satisfy them, we need therefore to customize our training programs to suit their expectations, which will also help us to retain them. Otherwise, those good employees might leave because they are not being satisfied through the traditional way of working. Next is the focus on the well-being of employees. One of the aspects of wellness programs is mental health and support. Employees in organizations may be having mental health problems. Others could be psychological factors like stress and also distress. These affect employees' performance. So wellness programs have become necessary, and we need to audit how well we are doing in this area so as to provide the needed support to our employees. And lastly is the data-driven decision-making, which has become the key thing today in modern organizations. HR managers make decisions based on data, be it recruitment or training or performance management or reward. We need to have data. So HR audit enables HR managers to obtain this data, which enables them to make informed decisions. So again, when we do HR audit, we develop HR metrics, which enable us to measure the success of our HR functions. And based on those metrics, we are able to make informed decisions. So I believe we are together to that point, unless there is a question that somebody may ask, so that I can move to the next part. Anybody with a question that I can answer very quickly? Okay, it seems that there is no question. I'll move to the next part, which is modern trends in HR audit. As I have indicated, the world of HRM is dynamic, and therefore we must be cognizant of the modern trends that are likely to affect the functioning of HR managers. One of the trends that has emerged since COVID is remote working. People work from their homes or from their farms or from their vehicles. So the question that we need to ask ourselves, that is this remote working compliant with the various labor laws that we have? How are we going to balance between remote working, for example, and discipline? Suppose somebody has committed an offense while they are working remotely. There are policies that govern discipline. That if somebody is working remotely and has divulged confidential information, that is a violation of the policies. So we need to find out how best we can support people who are working remotely to ensure that organizational data is not lost or is not disseminated to unauthorized persons. So in this way, we are expected to audit how well remote working is effective, and then develop strategies to ensure that people working remotely are productive. One of the ways of doing this is to agree with the employees on certain targets. At the end of a period, we assess the extent to which these targets have been met, or their performance during meetings. For some organizations, they have developed dashboards where when they are having online meetings or virtual meetings, each of the employees assess themselves. So, and they assess others. So whatever assessment they give is posted on the dashboard, and that becomes a routine for assessing those people who are working from their homes or elsewhere. Another trend that is emerging is DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. This audit looks at the programs and initiatives that HR managers are put in place to ensure that everybody is given an opportunity to participate in organizational activities and also be recruited or hired to work in that organization. As HR managers, we are expected to develop diversity policies, which will help us to ensure that people from different backgrounds are brought on board so that they can showcase their skills, experience, and innovation. Equity is about fairness, that our systems must be fair. For example, if our compensation system is fair, then we can conduct a survey to find out whether the employees are happy with that. Inclusion is that everybody has a right to participate in organizational activities, including working with the organization. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is another modern trend that we need to audit as HR managers, because through this, we are able to tap into the talents of people from diverse backgrounds. The other trend is sustainability and CSR, where we are looking at the role of HR on matters environment and the community around which we operate. As HR managers, we are expected to ensure that the work environment is clean and safe to avoid illnesses and accidents. And this can be done in a sustainable way, that we train our people on environmental aspects. For example, water conservation. How do we ensure that we don't waste a lot of water for which we pay huge bills? Or electricity. Can we train our employees to switch off lights when they are not in use? Or if need be, bring systems that have sensors where if somebody is not in an office, the lights switch off automatically. Or even our computers, they should switch off automatically. So in as much as we want to improve our services, we also want to take care of our environment. So HR auditors look at how well we are conserving our environment. In terms of corporate social responsibility, we are looking at what HR managers can do to support the community around them. Some of the aspects that or activities HR managers can engage in include sponsoring sports activities or educational programs for people around the community. Or others provide financial resources to buy food for people who cannot get food easily around the community. So as HR managers, this is an emerging issue. And then when we are auditing our systems, we look how responsive are we to our environment and what is it that we can do to create a good working relationship between our organizations and the community around which we work. Another aspect which is a trend in HR audit is agility and flexibility, that our systems need to adapt flexibly to the changes in the environment. That, for example, we cannot use the traditional way of attracting candidates mainly through newspapers. Very few people can access newspapers today. And as a way of being flexible, our recruitment system has to adopt technologies like ATS. ATS is a system of recruitment where we are tracking application. So it's application tracking system which monitors the way people applied, how many have applied, how many went to the next stage. So this application tracking system is a way in which we can be flexible in recruitment and selection. Even onboarding. Today, we don't do onboarding the traditional way. Onboarding starts long before the employees report to work. So there's the pre-onboarding activities that we can engage in so that we can create a good brand for ourselves as an organization. This is a way of being agile or flexible in terms of recruitment and selection. In training, we can be agile as well. That we don't have to have physical trainers to equip our employees with skills and knowledge. We can implement learning management systems where people can learn through the resources that are in their systems. This can be used to equip people with new skills and knowledge, as well as track their progress and also even evaluate their performance during training. The other modern trend is AI and automation. AI has taken the world by storm, and that many of the functions that were performed manually now can be done through AI. Depending on which AI tools that we are using, many of us use the generative AI, where we generate solutions through the use of artificial intelligence. It is a kind of problem-solving tool that can help us to perform various functions in HR. For example, through AI, we can develop training programs. Through AI, we can assess the performance of employees. Through AI, we can develop payrolls. Through AI, we can also do recruitment and selection. So there's no limit to using AI in HR. There's a fear that people are going to lose jobs through automation. But as the world evolves, even people must also evolve in order to fit in this new environment. So we can comfortably say that AI can be effectively used in HR audit, that we are able to assess the effectiveness of our HR functions and what can be done to improve these systems. Now, we are moving towards employee experience as one of the key aspects of employer branding. That even in marketing, people don't just sell product, they sell experience. So in HR, we are now focusing on employee experience from the time they join the organization to the time they leave. So onboarding is one of the ways in which we can create this experience, and the way we prepare ourselves for exit and separation. The training that we give people before exit so that we can prepare them for the world beyond work is part of this experience. So in HR audit, we are going to look more at what HR managers are doing in order to enhance this employee experience so that we can attract more qualified people. Because if employees have the right experiences, they are likely to attract others and retain those with the right skills and knowledge. The other one that I've highlighted is data-driven decision-making. That we cannot make decisions today without data. For example, in recruitment, as a function of HR, we make decisions based on the data that we have. One of the areas in which we need data in recruitment is job descriptions. That we need to update our job descriptions or develop new ones. When we do an audit, we can find out which jobs need to be reviewed and which new jobs have come up in the environment. So when we audit, we will generate data related to job descriptions, which is an area of decision making when it comes to recruitment and selection. In human resource planning, there is a lot of data that is also developed. I am sure many of us have interacted with or have participated in human resource planning. The first thing that many HR managers do in human resource planning is to conduct a head count. Head count basically means the number and the quality of people who are currently working in the organization. Through this head count, we are able to forecast into the future. So we look into the future by looking at the technology in place and where the competition is going. So we identify trends. So through this trend analysis, through the headcount, we generate data. So this data will help us to prepare human resource plans. And there are many other areas where we need data to make decisions. For example, in employee relations, particularly disciplinary process, that as HR managers, we need to follow due process. When a person has committed an offense, there is a process that is followed. Depending on the nature of the offense, HR managers make decisions based on data. For example, minor indiscipline, where a person has come late once, or a person has damaged company property unwillingly, this forms part of the data. That if these small offenses accumulate, they become gross misconduct for which disciplinary action can be taken. In the case of gross misconduct, we also need data. We need to find out what offense the employee has committed, such as insubordination or negligence or harassment. So all this requires data. And when somebody has committed this, he or she is called to a disciplinary meeting to defend themselves. So through these disciplinary meetings, we also collect data. So HR audit helps us to develop the data on the basis of which we can make those informed decisions related to the various aspects of HR. I want us now to address the scope of HR audits. What does it cover? In each of these areas that we are going to cover here, we are looking at the infrastructure that is required in each of them. By infrastructure, I mean the basic components that must be present for a function to be said to be successful. And I dare say that some of this infrastructure include: 1, the systems; 2, the processes; 3, the procedures; and 4, the policies. So in all the areas that we are going to look at, this infrastructure is going to be very handy when we are evaluating their effectiveness. Let us start with recruitment and selection. What should be evaluated here or audited is the hiring process. The other one is job descriptions, and others is legal compliance. So in terms of the architecture, we are looking at: 1, is there a policy on recruitment and selection? Secondly, is there compliance with this policy and the legal compliance? Does the policy comply with the labor law, particularly the Employment Act? 3, on recruitment and selection, are there adequate systems of identifying qualified candidates? And that means that we must have systems for screening the applications, for interviewing, and for selection. So we must have in place screening systems or interviewing panels consisting of qualified people. And then it goes all the way to onboarding. So as an HR auditor, you are asking yourself: is there a policy? Is there a process? Is it participative enough? Is it compliant with the labor laws? And also, is there an onboarding process which is effective? So recruitment is quite long. And again, you look at all the key aspects that are related to it, because this process enables us to get the right person. And the right person is one who can do the job for which he or she was hired. Looking at employee relations, this is the relationship between the employee. What characterizes this relationship are three factors. One, participation. Two, involvement. And three, consultation. These three aspects help organizations to create a good working relationship between the managers and employees. Specifically, we are looking at grievance handling procedure. If there are any complaints, is there a procedure for handling them? So the HR auditors will look at whether there is a process for handling grievances. For example, in a grievance, there must be a reporting procedure. Where do the people who are aggrieved report to? Is there a record of the grievances? Are these grievances acted upon? And if they are, what are the outcomes of these grievances? Because if there are many grievances in an organization, that creates a strained relationship. The same with conflict. Conflict are differences between employees themselves or employees and managers. In many cases, conflicts arise between the union and the management. These conflicts may relate to compensation and the benefits. They may relate to discipline. They may relate to working conditions, or may relate to promotion. Are there mechanisms for resolving these conflicts? That is what HR auditors could be looking for. I've talked about disciplinary actions because an effective disciplinary procedure helps to create a good working relationship. That at the end of this procedure, employees are not disciplined irregularly or dismissed illegally. So employee relations is about creating that good relationship. And it's upon us as HR auditors to find out whether there are mechanisms like the ones that I've mentioned. So I've mentioned on grievance, conflict resolution, and disciplinary actions. There are other aspects related to employee relations, such as communication. Communication is one of the ways in which HR managers can help to resolve conflicts or even grievances. Communications also help people to understand things so that they can reduce these conflicts. So is there an effective communication system that can promote employee-employer relations? A good communication system is one that is accurate, relevant, and timely. So as HR auditors, we want to look at the communication system, whether it is written or verbal. Are there meetings to handle these issues? Are there records of communications between employers and employees? Are there reports? So all these are important in developing a good relationship in organizations. The other aspect that is audited in HR is compensation and benefits. Compensation is what employees get for doing their work. Benefits are any form of rewards that employees are given in addition to what they are paid for working. So as HR managers, we are going to audit the compensation and the benefit system with respect to several aspects. One is whether there is a salary structure. This salary structure enables people to be paid depending either on their grade or on their family structure. So using a graded pay system, for example, we are looking at various grades from the lowest to the highest. So as HR auditors, we are looking at whether there exists a system for paying employees. And this system must promote equity and fairness. For benefits, there are various benefits that employers give their employees as a way of motivating them and retaining, like health benefits. Some organizations give their employees medical cover. Others give their employees mental and psychological support systems. All these are intended to motivate and retain staff. That a good compensation system is one that is based on salary surveys. So the question that our HR auditor could ask is whether the organization has conducted salary surveys. In the public sector, I know that you may not be conducting these salary surveys because they are usually conducted by SRC, that is Salaries and Remuneration Commission. But they don't just develop salaries on their own. There is usually a consultation between the various MDAs and the commission itself. Pamela, if you could mute your microphone. Pamela, mute your microphone. Thank you. So in a salary structure, to develop a salary structure, there must be a salary survey, which can be conducted internally or externally by consultants. However, this salary structure must also be in compliance with the labor laws. There are certain provisions that are contained in the Employment Act in particular, which talk about adherence to certain legal requirements. For example, are there statutory deductions in this compensation and benefit system? We know that it's a legal requirement for employers to conduct or adhere to the statutory deductions, such as pay as you earn. So is this system compliant with this law? And is this system fair? So those are the questions that HR auditors look at when they are auditing compensation and benefits. The next key aspect that is audited is performance management. It looks at the systems, the processes, and the policies that govern performance management. In particular, it analyzes performance appraisals. So HR auditors look at the various types of appraisals that are in place and their effectiveness. In the majority of organizations, there are these types of appraisals. One is self-appraisal. 2, peer appraisal. 3, downward appraisal. 4, upward appraisal. And the last is 360-degree appraisal. So looking at all these types of appraisals, the audit will establish whether they are achieving the intended results. So in performance management, we look at the various appraisal systems and how effective they are. Again, these appraisals should enable managers to get relevant feedback on the basis of which they can make decisions. Employees should also get feedback on their performance, feedback on their areas of strength, and feedback on their areas of weakness. Without this feedback, employees may never know how well they are doing. So in the HR audit, we look at the systems for giving employee feedback. It could be through mails, It could be through the staff portal, or it could be through reports that are written by their respective managers. So as one of the areas that is audited, we need to assess the effectiveness of performance management in our organizations. The fifth area that is audited is training and development. This area examines the policies, the processes, and the practices that promote training and development, which means skills acquisition. An auditor should always ask whether there is a training and development policy, and whether this policy is working and is up to date. It is one thing to have a policy, and is another one to make sure that it is helping organizations achieve its objectives. So in this policy, there are several aspects that could be captured there, one of which is training needs assessment or analysis. That the policy should provide for identification of training needs, because we cannot take people for training without identifying their performance gaps. So these performance gaps help us to identify which employee needs what training. So as HR auditors, we look at training and development in terms of policy. Two, we could also examine career development and growth. Are there opportunities for employees to develop their careers? Or are there systems to help employees identify and pursue their careers within the organization? Which means that there should be systems to help employees, one, provide career guidance and counseling so that they can identify their career objectives or achieve their career objectives. There should also be provisions for promotion so that people can enhance their careers. So as HR auditors, we are looking at whether these opportunities exist and whether they are working. We could also look at training and development in terms of other methods like mentorship and coaching. This is part of succession planning. That when we train our people, we not only improve their performance, but also prepare them for future positions, and this becomes part of our succession plan. So the question that HR auditors could ask themselves is whether or not the training and development initiatives are helping the organization to prepare succession plans. Other areas include compliance with labor laws, which I've already mentioned, and I can repeat some of the laws that we need to comply with in various aspects of HR. One is the Employment Act, which talks about recruitment and selection, discipline, and the statutory deductions, among others. The other labor law is Occupational Safety and Health Act, whose main focus is to ensure that the environment in which employees operate is healthy and safe. There are certain minimum requirements that are provided for in this law, such as ventilation, spacing, and also provision of protective gear. The other law is the Work Injury and Benefits Act, that if employees are injured in the workplace, what should happen It provides the procedures and the processes that are followed for employees, one, to be treated, and two, to be compensated. And we must have policies in HR related to health and safety, which again are in compliance with the WIBA, Work Injury and Benefit Act. The other law that HR managers should be conversant with is the Labor Relations Act and the Labor Institutions Act. They sometimes go together. The Labor Relations Act talks about the relationship between the employer and the employee, particularly the union. What is the relationship? If there is a dispute, what should happen? What process should be followed? So these labor laws must be complied with in HR management. When you talk of recruitment and selection, training, performance management, and health and safety, we all need to ensure that our practices, our policies, and our procedures are in compliance with the labor laws. Another aspect which forms part of the scope of HR audit is employee retention and engagement. It may not be a function per se, but a strategy within an organization to ensure that employees are attracted and retained for a long time. So the questions that HR auditors always ask is whether there are adequate and clear retention strategies and how employees are satisfied through various initiatives. Some of the retention strategies, if I may mention, include compensation strategies or benefits. So there must be adequate compensation and benefits for employees to be retained. The other retention strategy is opportunity for growth and development. That means equal opportunity for promotion and advancement to other higher levels. In terms of engagement, is the degree to which employees are able and willing to identify with the organization and stay with the organization for a long time. Employees can be disengaged because of what is going on in the organization. So this disengagement can be reviewed. And engaged employees are those who are committed, who are satisfied, and who identify with the organization. So there are several things that HR managers can do to ensure that employees are engaged. One is to redesign their job descriptions so that employees are occupied, the jobs are interesting and challenging. Two, they can also involve them in decision-making processes. That these are the key stakeholders of an organization, and the decisions that are made about them should also involve them. So employee involvement and participation enables organizations to engage their employees and make them committed. HR documentation is another area that is assessed in HR audit. And here we are looking at 4 key aspects. One is the accuracy of the records, 2, completeness, and 3, compliance. It is a requirement that all the records that we keep is in compliance with all the labor laws. And talking of which, especially data, there is the Data Act. And if organizations are not compliant, they can easily be fined. So how do we document these records? By ensuring that they are kept in a way that cannot be accessed by any other person, by ensuring confidentiality. So if data is divulged to third parties, then our documentation is in question. And the office of the ODPC can come to us and can prosecute our organizations. ODPC's Office of the Data Protection Commission, which is a regulator on how, where, and in which way data can be stored and shared. So it can also be an audit query where data is accessed by anybody who is not authorized to access that. Workforce planning and succession is another function that is performed by HR managers, and the HR auditors always look at the effectiveness of this function. In HR planning, we are forecasting the future workforce in terms of numbers and their qualifications. The HR planning function also involves succession planning, that those people that we retain in our organizations can be prepared to take over senior positions in future. So in succession planning, we prepare people at lower levels to occupy senior positions. And that is an aspect of HR planning. And this is in line with the exit and separation policies that we have. That before an employee exits or is separated from the organization, there must be adequate numbers and the qualities of people who can succeed them. So people leave organizations for various reasons, but the key thing here is that do we have people who can succeed them? The other aspect in succession plan, rather in workforce planning, is talent management. That talent is about acquiring, retaining, and maintaining the right quality of staff. So part of talent management is training and development, mentorship, coaching, where the skills and the knowledge that people have is also used effectively. So workforce planning is fairly broad, talking about one, headcount, two, focusing future HR requirement, three, preparing the human resource plan, four, implementing the HR plan, and five, reviewing the plan. So all these are elements that can be audited. So the question we ask ourselves is this. One, is there a record of current establishment? Two, is there a record of future forecasts? Three, is there a record of HR plans in place? And five, is there a record of the successful initiatives arising from workforce planning? The other area that is audited is diversity and inclusion, which I've talked about, but I would like to address myself to the last one on my screen, that is health and safety. Health and safety is very important because it ensures that employees are productive. Employees who are sick or who are injured are not productive. So we need to focus on this as HR auditors to ensure that the environment in which people work is healthy and safe. So healthy initiatives must always be there. So when you are auditing HR health and safety, you look at several factors. One, the health and safety policy. Two, health and safety committees. Three, health and safety inspections. And four, wellness programs. So all these are aspects of audit which HR managers could be looking at to ensure that they are all effective. I guess I have addressed the scope of HR, unless there's somebody who has a question so that I can address it as we move on. Anybody who has a question that I can address very quickly? Betty, if you are online, you can say something about what I've said. Emmanuel Chemngeno, if you have any comment, you can make it. Mwikia, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. My question was on the HR documentation.
Yes, if I may go back one step.
Yeah, is it okay to be shared? Employee
Sorry?
details? Is it right to share employee details with the financial auditors in an organization?
Come up again. I didn't hear it. You are breaking.
Is it right to be shared the employee details, especially on payroll and bank with the financial auditors when they're doing the organizational audit?
As long as the documentation does not violate any Data Protection Act, yes, you can. I know for those of us who are working in the public sector, the Office of the Auditor General usually visits to audit our system, particularly financial aspects. So the Office of the Auditor General will come and assess our systems, our processes, and our procedures. They might ask for various documents related to payment or financials, which are part of the requirements of the audit. Most of the audits that are conducted by the Office of the Auditor General are financial in nature. So they will want to see how many employees you have, how much they are paid, what are the provisions for this payment, and whether there are any irregularities. So yes, you can share the data because this is part of your day-to-day functioning, without which you can't. HR managers process various types of data related to finances, such as payroll. Finance officers in our department, or in our organizations, also have access to this data. For them to pay anybody, they must have data related to attendance, for example, or any surcharge which have to be deducted from the employee salaries. So, in my opinion, yes, it is okay to share data within the organization. The only reason why you can't share data is when it goes to a third party. That, for example, a fellow employee knowing how much another employee is earning, or any other confidential data that is related to an employee. And I believe all of us have signed a non-disclosure agreement with our organizations that any confidential information should not be shared. So HR managers have signed that agreement. Financial managers have shared that agreement. And for the Office of the Auditor General, that's a legal requirement. And therefore, they also have their confidentiality clauses. So sharing of such data with people who are authorized is quite in order. Thank you, Betty.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody with a comment or a question? Okay. If there is no further question, I propose that we move to the next part. And this is who can conduct the HR audit. HR audit is not an individual process. It requires the effort of other players or stakeholders in the organization. As HR managers, it's advisable to create an internal team that can help us to conduct the audit. So HR managers can drive this process by creating an audit team within the HR function. There are various officers in various fields like employee relations, compensation, and even training. These are the various units within HR. So HR managers can create this team from various units within the HR function to conduct the audit. The officer in training will bring his or her experience to audit training. The one on employee relations will bring his or her experience to audit employee relations. The one in charge of payroll and compensation brings his or her experience to the table. So one of the auditors is the internal HR team, which can be created by the HR manager. The second group of people who can conduct the audit is HR managers or directors. How do they do this? They use their own personal experience, either from within the organization or from other organizations with which they have worked. However, there is a possibility of biasness because of their experiences if this is conducted by HR managers only or directors. So it's always advisable that we work as a team, not as an individual. The third group that can conduct HR audits is internal audit department. I'm sure almost all organizations have this audit department. And my suggestion is that if this audit department is in existence, there must be somebody within this department who is conversant with the HR functions. Because many a times the internal auditors focus on financials and leave out on HR issues. So that's why we need the internal audit department to constitute HR professionals from within the organization. That is if they have not been involved before. But if they have been, then the internal HR audit department should include HR professionals who are qualified to audit the HR functions. The other group is cross-functional teams, where different people are drawn from different departments such as legal, finance, marketing, production, and others, so that they can audit. HR managers can train other departmental heads on how to conduct the audits. Now that we are going to be certified at the end of this program to be HR auditors, you can train others. You can become a trainer of trainers in other departments so that you can form these cross-functional teams to assist in conducting the audit. That does not mean that finance cannot audit HR, because we have already mentioned that finance is one of the areas that can be audited, especially on areas of compensation or productivity. If somebody has produced, what commission are they being paid? So finance can work with HR and legal to form this cross-functional team to conduct the audits. You can also conduct surveys within your organization, and this can be through questionnaires or through interviews, so that you can get feedback from the people in the organization. So the HR department is the one to spearhead this, that instead of using people from the department or cross-functional teams or internal audit, you can circulate a survey tool where you can get feedback on how well you are doing. So you can structure your questionnaire based on the various HR functions like recruitment, training, performance management, compensation and benefits, and ask questions about the adequacy of all those areas, how effective they are, and whether there are any areas of improvement. Another group that can do this is compliance officers. Compliance officers can be within or outside the organization. For example, in health and safety, there are compliance officers that can be within an organization. These compliance officers ensure that health and safety policies are adhered to and that there are legal requirements that are followed, such as health and safety audits. So compliance officers can do that from within the organization. If not, you can ask the labor officers to do the assessment. Compliance officers from the labor office can always come to assess your HR functions. So what happens here, they will always come and look at your documents, whether they are properly kept and they are in compliance with the various labor laws. So it is another opportunity for us to ensure that our processes, systems, and procedures are effective by inviting these compliance officers to do the assessment. External auditors, like the Office of the Auditor General, can also come to evaluate our systems. Previously, they didn't have qualified HR professionals who could do HR audits, but today they have professionals from different areas in finance, in human resource, and even in technical areas such as engineering. So OAG can help us to audit our systems and identify gaps in HR practices that can be improved. Another external auditors are HR consultants, which we can use to provide us with independent insights and observations of what we are doing. This is on the understanding that when we conduct it ourselves internally, we are likely to be biased. So external HR consultants, one, bring their expertise from the industry based on on the organizations they have audited. And two, they are likely to give an independent opinion on what is happening with our HR systems and policies. So if you have some resources that you can spare as an organization, you can engage an external consultant to give you insights on the various HR functions with respect to processes, procedures, and systems. And they can help to make recommendations on the way forward. I guess I've covered all the people who can conduct HR audits in an organization. And I guess we are now clear on who can conduct HR audits. Any question to that point? Okay, so if there's no question, we can go to the limitations. Yes, somebody has a question? Yes.
Yes, the quality assurance.
Yes.
Can we also
Betty is asking whether quality assurance team can also be included as HR auditors. The answer is yes. In the majority of organizations, quality assurance is a department. And as I've indicated earlier, there is this cross-functional team that you can create to conduct the HR audit. So if quality assurance is one of the departments in your organization, you can bring them on board to be part of the cross-functional team to conduct these HR audits. They will bring in their expertise in terms of quality aspects related to recruitment procedures, training, performance appraisal, but they may not have the technical and professional expertise to audit HR function in totality, because quality department also assesses other areas. I want to believe that HR professionals within these organizations are also members of this quality department. So if that is the case, yes, they can work with HR to conduct these HR audits. I guess I've answered your question, Betty.
Yes. As you answered, I realized, yes, the HR department is also part of the quality assurance. But I'm also wondering on the internal audits. We have an internal audit or finance accountants or finance people. And there is no one who is conversant with the HR
who is
function.
very conversant with the
They are
HR.
the ones doing the HR audit.
And then they're the ones doing the HR audit. And sometimes you feel like they are biased by the fact that there are areas they don't really look at. But the audit, of course, there are recommendations that they make, but sometimes you feel like they are really onto just figures, not in totality the functions of the HR. So would we then disqualify them by the fact that they don't have an expert in that area of HR? Thank you.
Thank you, Betty, for that question. Yes, sometimes we feel that there are people who are conducting HR audits and yet they don't have what it takes to do the audits. As I have mentioned, now that you have likely or you will be certified HR auditors at the end of this process, you will be able to train those other auditors who have been conducting HR audits without the qualifications, so that they now become conversant with the key aspects that should be audited in HR. Secondly, if need be, you can take them for trainings, especially training for non-HR managers, so that they can also become aware of what aspects of HR can be audited. Through this training, even if they are from finance or from production, they are able to appreciate the role of HR in organizations, and also when they are conducting the audit in conjunction with the HR department, they can easily understand what the HR department is doing. So my take is two. One, you train those people now that you have been trained so that they can conduct the HR audits. Or two, I recommend that you take them for training for non-HR managers so that they can appreciate the functioning of the HR department. I believe I've answered your question, Betty.
Thank you.
Okay, now we move to limitations of HR audit. Looking at our program, it's almost the last one. So the limitations of HR audit are the challenges that HR managers are likely to face when they are conducting audits. One of the limitations is the limited scope of review. As I had mentioned earlier on, I said that there are various types of HR audits, one of which is strategic audit, another one is functional audit, which is performance audit, another one is compliance audit, among others. Depending on what the organization wants to achieve, many of the audits focus on some of these types and ignoring the others, especially on the part of strategic audit. Many directors in most organizations always ask, what is the HR department bringing on board to achieve the strategic objectives or the bottom line of the organizations? So this becomes a challenge because the HR functions are ignored and the focus becomes on strategic alignment. This becomes biased because other areas are left unattended or unaudited. For example, compliance. Many of organizations are taken to court because of compliance issues. So the managers may focus mainly on compliance and forget about the effectiveness of other HR functions like recruitment, training, performance, and others. Speaking of which, we can talk about strategic aspects. For example, if you are a business partner, you need to support your organizations to achieve its strategic objectives. And many a times, especially if we use the balanced scorecard model or as a tool of evaluation, we look at the 4 parameters which are contained in the balanced scorecard. I can mention 3: the financial aspect, 2, the internal growth, and 3, the customer focus. If you look at all or at the 3, none of them talks about HR. So you look at the finances, for example, you are likely to focus more on how and how much employees are generating financial resources so that the shareholders are happy. Or if you look at the other aspect of customer focus, so we are focusing mainly on customers and forgetting the employees. So that becomes a limitation. Secondly is data dependence. The HR function does not work in isolation. It works in consultation and in dependence on other functions, such as finance department or production department or public relations department or marketing. Dependence on other data sources becomes a challenge. How is it a challenge? Because what data is available in other departments may not be adequate to conduct the HR audits. And therefore, it becomes a bit difficult for HR managers when conducting this audit to gain a full picture of what is going on in other departments. For example, certain documents may be missing, others are incomplete, others have been lost. So it becomes a bit difficult to compile a report where such documents are missing. Which means that HR managers have to work with other organizations and other departments to ensure that the data is available as and when needed. The other limitation is resistance to change. sorry. Resistance to change is real. My computer is not showing what I'm showing. Resistance is where people refuse to accept certain changes. For example, when conducting the HR audit, there is a possibility that people might fear that after the audit, they might be affected, that their job roles may change, others may lose their jobs. So this resistance becomes a problem, and employees may not give accurate information when conducting the audit. Other limitations include cost and time constraints. Conducting a HR audit, especially using external consultants, is expensive, especially in an environment where cost cutting is a real issue. So cost becomes a challenge. For example, in government today, there are austerity measures that are being undertaken to ensure that government spends within its means. One of the aspects that has been affected is training. So many employees and employers are not taking training because of the need to cut costs. The other limitation is the legal complexities, where there are so many laws which must be complied with by the HR managers. I have already mentioned various laws, and there are new ones which have come into force. For example, the housing levy will be included in the many labor laws. The other one is the SHA, Social Health Authority, and the SHIF. We must make adjustments to all this to ensure that we are compliant. And the timelines are set. For you to conduct this audit, you must always keep abreast with the changes in legal requirements. Next is the requirements for HR auditors. What is it that HR auditors must have for them to conduct the audits effectively? These are the qualifications of the HR auditors, and I've given quite a number of them. One is educational background. The basic requirement here is that they must have a degree or a certificate in HR. In the past, HR managers, or rather call them personnel managers, used to be hired from any field, including anthropology. Now that HR has become a profession, we need to hire qualified HR managers who understand the HR functions. So as a requirement, you need to have an adequate educational background, preferably a diploma, a degree, or a master's. And in addition, you should always update your skills in terms of continuous professional development, where you get these certifications. Another requirement is knowledge of the labor laws. We don't expect HR auditors or HR managers to become lawyers, but they must have some understanding of all the labor laws and the basic provisions. I have mentioned the various labor laws like Employment Act, Labor Relations Act, Occupational Safety and Health Act, as well as WIBA, that is Work Injury and Benefits Act. So HR managers are expected to have knowledge of these labor laws, especially when it comes to matters compliance. You cannot audit compliance if you don't have an understanding of the labor laws. The other one is HR expertise. You must have participated in recruitment, performance, and HR audits for you to perform this HR audit effectively. If you have participated in the recruitment and selection, it becomes very easy for you to conduct the recruitment and selection audit. If you have conducted performance management, you become an expert in that area. So it becomes very easy. So we need expertise. And expertise comes from experience, that these are the people who are experienced in matters related to HR functions. Analytical skills, in research, you must have ability to analyze data. Because audit helps us to collect data, we are going to analyze this data, interpret the data, and present findings. So without analytical skills, it becomes difficult for HR auditors to conduct the audit or even make intelligent interpretations and recommendations. So as a requirement, analytical skills are required. How do you get the analytical skills? Again, it's about going back to school and exposing yourself to research methods where you can collect, analyze, and interpret data in a professional way. Attention to detail, as it were, HR audit is a detailed process where you are going to look at all the HR functions, processes, procedures, and policies. This is fairly detailed. So if you don't have ability to identify some of the details, it becomes difficult for you to conduct the HR audit. Experience is mandatory. Probably 1, 2, 3, 4 years of experience can enable a person to conduct HR audits. There's also the element of communication as a requirement. HR managers should be excellent communicators. We communicate a lot of information, both verbally and in writing. So in communication, HR managers should communicate about performance, communicate about recruitment, about training, because without this communication, the other employees may not be aware of what is going on or happening in the HR department. The directors of the company may not know what is going on. So HR audit requires communication skills. So this communication skills enables you to write a good report, which can be presented to the relevant authorities for approval or implementation of the changes that are being recommended through the HR audit. The other requirement is ethical judgment. Today we are talking about matters of honesty, integrity, and confidentiality. Some of the audits that we conduct touch on confidential information related to employees and the organization. So one of the ethical requirements is the ability of the HR auditors to maintain confidentiality. For example, matters to do with the health and safety of employees. If employees have been tested as a requirement by the health and safety policy, the HR manager has this information which is confidential. This information should not be divulged to anybody because this is a breach of data, and the employee has a right to seek legal redress if this confidentiality is breached. We also need to be honest with the way we do our business when it comes to HR audit. Honesty is about telling the truth as it is. There are a lot of gaps that we are likely to identify during the audit. So honesty will help us to identify the gaps and present them as they are without covering up. On matters integrity, we must behave in a way that brings honor and respect to our officers. Matters like corruption are integrity issues. So if there is anything that HR managers identify through HR audits, there is a possibility that some people may want to corrupt the minds and even the reports that are written through this audit. So ethical judgments are important in the sense that they help to keep the professionalism in the process. They also help to ensure that there is accurate reporting, and also that there is legal compliance with all the aspects that we have mentioned. Lastly is the element of human resource information familiarity, that HR managers should have skills to operate computers using different software. We have talked about systems in various areas of HR function, which help us to conduct audits. For example, ATS, which I said is application tracking system. So if this is a system within HR, the HR managers should be able to use this. It's a software. Another one is ERP, that is enterprise resource planning, which HR managers should be familiar with. This system helps to approve leave days, conduct appraisals, and also develop payrolls. So if these HR managers are not conversant with these HR systems, then it becomes difficult for them to conduct audits. And as I have mentioned earlier, one of the trends that we are witnessing in HR audit today is technology. So if software is part of this technology we are talking about, then HR managers should lead the way in ensuring that people have the skills in operating these systems. What is the role of HR auditors in an organization? As we close the session, there are quite a number of roles that HR auditors play, one of which is to conduct audits. And that is the reason why we are in this training, to help us understand how to conduct the HR audits. By the end of this process, we shall have a clear understanding of what to audit, to the process of auditing, and 3, how to write an audit report. So your role as HR auditors is to conduct the audits. 2 is gathering data. We shall go through data gathering methods in this course, particularly interviews, questionnaires, observations, and focus groups. These are tools that we use to collect data. So as HR managers conducting HR audits, we need to gather this data and relevant data, not just any data, which will help us develop accurate audit reports that can help organizations improve their systems, their policies, and procedures. The other role is to evaluate compliance, that HR managers are conversant with the labor laws, as I have mentioned, and the regulatory requirements. So it is important for them to have an understanding of these labor laws. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for them to evaluate compliance if they have no knowledge of the various labor laws. Analysis is another role in audit. They analyze data. Analysis of data is very important, that without this analysis, then there will be no audit. In data analysis, you are looking at several things. One, the type of data that you have collected, you group it together, organize it, interpret it, and also make recommendations. So without analyzing of this HR audit, it becomes a bit challenging for the HR managers to be successful in the audit. Lastly, they need to identify risks. Various risks exist in the HR function. Risks may be related to training, to compensation, to performance management, to legal compliance. These risks affect the organizations negatively. For example, if there are no adequate strategies for retention, the employees may leave the organization, and that becomes a risk. What kind of risk does employee turnover pose to the organization? One is loss of skilled and talented employees. That when we lose these employees, then we may not be competitive in our market. Two, we may risk lawsuits. Employees can go to court if our processes, systems, and procedures are not in compliance with the labor laws. We end up paying huge fines, or in some cases risk imprisonment, because of failure to follow the legal requirements governing the HR functions. So HR auditors identify various risks related to employment and legal issues so that we cannot, or rather we reduce chances of being sued or losing money. The other role is reporting findings. At the end of this training, we shall look at the various components that go into the audit reports. And therefore, it is important for the HR auditors to be conversant with how to present their report findings. The other one is work with the stakeholders, both within and outside the organizations. As I have said before, HR audit is not for HR department only. We can work with other departments like finance, marketing, production. So this talks about working as a team so that we achieve better results. We know the principle of teamwork or synergy, where the collaborative efforts of different people produces better results. So if you want to have a better audit process, we need to engage other stakeholders. These stakeholders, as I've mentioned, could be employees, departmental heads, and even senior managers. And I would always recommend that you bring senior managers on board as soon as you contemplate conducting a HR audit. Because if you don't involve them, you cannot guarantee their commitment. So their involvement from the very beginning helps them to assign resources for this process and also help you personally to achieve this and also inspiring others to participate in this process. Recommendations are also included in these reports. So HR auditors have to make recommendations on what their findings are and how various functions can be improved. Where need be, they provide training where there are training gaps. Lastly, I want us to look at the importance of HR audit. Why do we do all this audit? One is to ensure legal compliance, that through HR audits, we are able to comply with the various labor laws and therefore avoiding lawsuits. Like I have mentioned, various functions of HR are regulated, like recruitment, training, performance, data records, health and safety, among others. So legal compliance helps us to avoid those legal issues. Second is problem solving. During the HR audits, we identify various gaps. These gaps could be related to performance, legal compliance, or strategic issues. These are problems that could impede the attainment of departmental and organizational objectives. So when we conduct HR audits, we identify problems in various areas. If you look at the scope of HR that we mentioned, there are many of areas that we audit, such as recruitment, we identify problems there, training, we identify problems, performance management, we identify problems. So through HR audits, we are able to identify problems and then develop actionable solutions or recommendations to solve them. The other purpose of HR audit is to enhance efficiency. Efficiency has to do with optimization of resources. And how do we do this? Is by streamlining HR processes so as to reduce cost and inefficiencies in our systems. If a process like recruitment costs a lot of money, then it becomes problematic. It's not efficient. There is a way in which we can develop metrics for assessing the cost per hire, where we identify the number of jobs that were hired and the amount spent per job. So if the cost is very high, then recruitment and selection is inefficient. As a HR auditor, you need to identify areas where there are inefficiencies in this process and develop recommendations on how to improve. The other importance is risk management, that through HR audits, we are likely to identify various risks. And I can mention a number of risk areas. One is environmental risk. 2 is financial risk. 3 is market risk. And 4 is strategic risk. If I may pick the last one, the strategic risk, that as HR managers, we are in charge of the most important asset of the organization. And this asset are human resources. The strategies we formulate within HR inform the strategies that are formulated by the top managers. On the understanding that we are strategic partners in the organization, the strategies we develop in HR should help to assist the organization achieve its strategic objectives. So the moment we have ineffective and inefficient systems and processes in our HR function, then we are exposed to risks. Risks in employee turnover, risks in poor employer brand, risks in loss of money, risks in loss of customers. And all these affect the bottom line of the organization. So through HR audits, we are able to mitigate the various risks associated with human resources. The other purpose is to improve employee satisfaction. That if there is anything that can attract and retain people, it has to do with HR processes and systems. For example, reward. If our reward system is not adequate or is not attractive, then employees will not be attracted and therefore retention can be an issue. 2, our working conditions. If the working environment is not conducive, then employee satisfaction can go down. So we need to audit HR systems, processes, and procedures to improve employee satisfaction. And then the other role of HR audit is to assist in strategic planning. That HR function aligns with organizational or business objectives and strategies. For example, if an organization is intending to open new branches as part of its growth strategy, it needs to recruit talent to occupy those branches. Recruitment is a function of HR. So through recruitment and selection, HR managers are able to support the strategic plan of an organization, which is growth. However, a defective system like recruitment cannot help to achieve this strategic objective. And that is why we need to conduct this audit to identify where there are bottlenecks in the recruitment process so as to improve and achieve organizational strategic objectives. Another purpose of HR audit is continuous improvement. That as we start conducting these audits, it's not a one-off thing, it's a continuous process. Depending on what policies you will put in place, and I recommend that you conduct your HR audits after every 5 years in tandem with your strategic plan. Why in tandem with your strategic plan? It is because a strategic plan highlights the various strategies that are likely to be implemented. And these are cascaded to down to the HR department. So the HR managers will pick these strategies, audit their systems, and improve so as to achieve the new strategic plan or the reviewed plan. So it's a continuous process that never comes to an end. So as we embark on this journey of HR audit, ensure that you conduct it on a regular basis. And please ensure that it is part of your HR policies that you conduct this HR audit. If need be, you can conduct this audit with internal auditors as well as external auditors. This ensures that there are no gaps in HR and that there is continuous improvement. It also informs decision making, that when we conduct HR audit, and I mentioned it earlier, that it provides us with data. This data helps us to make informed decisions. The decisions that we make, whether it's promotion, transfer, training, is based on data. So through data, or through HR audits, we generate data, and that helps us to make those decisions. Through HR audit, again, we are able to strengthen our employer brand. Employer brand is the reputation of the organization, which helps to attract and retain top talent. When we have effective HR functions, we are likely to attract people. For example, if we recruit people without discrimination, and that we are an equal opportunity employer, it will attract people, especially top talent, to come to our organization. Secondly, if there are growth and development opportunities, the HR audit will help to identify this, and that can improve our reputation among the potential employees. The other aspect that strengthens our employer brand is our compensation and benefit system. When you conduct a HR audit, to identify weaknesses in that system, improve And again, that will improve our employer brand. That many of us employees would like to work with organizations that pay their employees well, and that their remuneration system is competitive. So a HR audit will identify a competitive compensation and benefit system, which can help to attract those potential candidates or employees. Second last, it ensures accurate data, that if you use the right tools like a questionnaire or interview checklists, you are likely to collect accurate data, because employees will be filling this data and your work is to analyze this data. So HR auditors help in ensuring that the data that is collected is accurate, is relevant, and is up to date. And then second last, before we close, is project management. Today, organizations emphasize a project management approach to various aspects of the organization. For example, recruitment and selection can be approached as a project. Training can be approached as a project. Performance management can be a project. And many other functions within the HR function. So by conducting HR audits, we are able to approach the performance of HR department in a way that is project-oriented. If I may talk about a project, it is any activity or undertaking that is performed within a particular time, within budget, and within certain quality parameters. HR auditing is a project. You cannot conduct HR audits throughout the year. There must be a time period within which you can do this. HR audit is conducted within a budget. So it's expected that as we conclude this course, that when you initiate an audit process, you will have a budget for it. So auditors, HR audits help us to manage the product quality, aspects of time, aspects of scope. And this helps us to be clear on where we are coming from, where we are going, and how best we can improve. Within the HR audit, there is the element of continuous monitoring and evaluation, which is part of project management. Continuous monitoring helps us to collect data and identify gaps as we are implementing various changes within the HR function. And the evaluation provides us with the metrics of measuring the effectiveness of those functions. So in project management, there is an element of monitoring and evaluation, and that is why audit comes in. Audit monitors and evaluates the various functions of HR and how best they can be improved going forward. I would have given you an exercise, but basically that is what I had prepared for this evening, touching on the foundations of HR. Particularly, we have looked at the introduction to HR, 2, the scope of HR, 3, the functions of HR audit, and lastly, who can conduct the HR audit. So on that note, I wish to bring this presentation to an end. I hope to see you again tomorrow at 5 o'clock. I want us now to react to what I have presented in terms of questions, in terms of comments, or even compliments if there are any. So the forum is open. If there are any questions, comments, and compliments, or even complaints, kindly let us have them. Anybody with a comment, a complaint, or something? Okay, the time now is 8 o'clock, and it's now time for us to stop there. I want to thank you very much, those of us who have attended this training this evening. I want to wish you a blessed and restful evening, and we see you again tomorrow. Goodbye for now.